Hey everybody, this is Ruben. Welcome back to the placebo effect. So this episode is going to go back to, I guess I call this a series regarding fear and how the enemy uses fear as probably his primary weapon of attack, and things that we need to do to just be focused on being mindful about it when it happens to you, and also how you can just surrender to God and get a peace that surpasses all understanding. So I'm going to talk about a current event. This is something that's happening right now, which is the coronavirus. It's been declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization. The president has declared a national emergency, and so whatever the numbers are, and however much people might have an inclination to try to make comparisons with historical other means of how we've been hit by other types of viruses. H1N1 tends to be a common example, for instance. And we're definitely in a time where in social media where things can escalate pretty quickly. Me personally, I think there's a little bit too much hysteria going on. I think trying to just keep this hyper focus by the news cycles and by social media just can cause unnecessary worry. So in that context, that's what I think might be happening to create some escalation to this situation. But at the same time, look, a lot of people in authority are having a very serious tone about this pandemic, and institutions are shutting down. Colleges are extending spring break. My wife is affected by that at her school. Some schools have even shut it down for the rest of the semester. So this is affecting us, at work, at school. Families are affected. People who own businesses are affected. People who have jobs that are affected by shutdowns are affected. So lots of people are affected by this. The actual virus aside, this is just affecting the world. So it's definitely something that we need to be aware of, and I wanted to talk towards it. So one of the things that has changed for me since being a Christian is just having an understanding of how much I am not in control of things, not in control of things around me. Certainly not a whole lot of control when it comes to my own life. I can't control what happens to me in the next hour from now, much less the next day from now. And before being a Christian, when I was an atheist, what's ironic is there was a time when things got pretty bad in my life, and when my life was the most out of control, mentally, I tried to do so many things in my life to try to be in control. I would impose my opinion. I'd give unsolicited advice to friends and family members and coworkers, and try to do everything I can to try to be in control of my life, even though my life hit a point where it was definitely out of control. And in that context, when I look at the current situation, I can definitely see how fear and worry can cause people to try to escalate to where they're stockpiling on rationing at the store, and even to the point where people are making a joke about, wow, even people are trying to just ration toilet paper and stockpile on toilet paper. And I probably would have been guilty of some of that, and would have probably done some of that behavior myself. But so one of the things that I like to meditate on is that Sermon on the Mount statement from Jesus, which can be found in Matthew 6. And the statement takeaway is, for who by worrying can add 1 hour to their life, right? And that was a very powerful statement, and I meditated on it quite regularly because I, on my own, am somebody who can get worried about stuff that are not in my control. I have had lots of instances where I just obsessed about things that were ironically outside of my control, and created worry. This is why this is such a powerful tool of the enemy. Fear can take root, and then you just obsess about it all day. It's all you're thinking about all day, every day. And when it comes to the coronavirus, then if it's constantly in the news cycles and constantly in social media, well, people are going to be thinking about it all the time. And you're going to start worrying and being anxious about a situation that's honestly really not in your control at all. And so that passage from the Sermon on the Mount really helps me a lot, because when you really think about it, what can worrying really do to your life? How can it affect you positively? It can't. It has never affected me positively. It's always just affected me physically. And I imagine that's probably true for a lot of people. And the fact that fear is not born of God. Fear is born of the enemy. The devil is the father of lies, and fear is his primary weapon. And I will also like to use 2 Timothy 1, and this one from the Amplified Bible. I think it's really strong. For God did not give us a spirit of timidity or cowardice or fear, but he has given us a spirit of power and love and sound judgment and personal discipline. God did not give us a spirit of fear. We are not intended to have fear as children of God. And when it comes to things outside of my control, I have found the best thing I can do is to surrender it to God. Because it's not in my control to determine whether or not I will or won't get the coronavirus. And no matter how sheltered we try to live our lives, it's possible to still be exposed to it somehow. And that's the thing, is you don't have any control over this. And because I don't have any control over it, surrendering it to God is the best thing that me and my wife have been doing and will continue to do. And then you will get a peace that surpasses all understanding, which is from Philippians 4:7. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And so ultimately all I can do is just surrender it to God and be at peace, and not let the enemy bring fear into our lives. And what I found is that having a peace that surpasses all understanding resonates with other people. You know, I was talking to a couple of coworkers, and one of them, I was kind of sad when I heard this story, because one of my coworkers, she had just shared with me about how much this has been affecting her life, where she kind of had her own little exit plan. How she was telling me that if she knew anybody that was exposed to coronavirus, that her and her husband were just gonna basically just get out of town and go stay in a different city for a little while, and she was going to just try to just work remote and work with letter, and same with her husband, and they were basically going to kind of hoard up for a couple of weeks and try to weather a storm, as if we understand whatever the timeline's going to be. And when I heard her say that, I was like, well, me and my wife are approaching things that way, and it actually makes me a little bit sad to hear you say that, because my inclination is to think that maybe you've been a little bit susceptible to this kind of hyper hysteria that has happened to some degree by social media and even by the news cycles. And again, I just want to level set that we need to take this seriously. But if all you're doing is focusing on it all the time, every day, checking everybody's Twitter feed and how much you're talking about coronavirus, or checking everybody's Facebook feed about how they're talking about coronavirus, or refreshing all the news cycles and trying to get the latest and greatest on coronavirus, well, you're going to have coronavirus on the brain all day, every day. Yeah, you're going to be affected by it. It's going to cause you to worry. And I had another coworker. I was in a training session, and as training was winding down, we had a break. My coworker was just got into the coronavirus story, and he was telling me that he was going to spend the weekend. I asked him how his weekend was, and he told me he was going to spend the weekend just stockpiling on stuff, going in as much water and as much goods as he could, because he didn't know what was going to happen. And he asked me if I was going to do the same, and I had peace about the situation. And I was like, hey, look, That's not something that me and my wife are going to do. That's not something that we really have control over. We're just going to continue to live our lives and go out about our business and trust in God. And I think the fact that like I was so peaceful and calm about it, it caught my coworker by surprise. I could see it on his face. He was a little bit taken aback by just how calm and peaceful I was about it. And that's definitely not because of me. Let me say that right now. That's the peace that surpasses all understanding. And that's what I encourage people to do, is just try to come from that place. Trust in God, surrender it to it, and you'll find that your peace just resonates with people, and it will catch people by surprise, and they might even ask you what's going on. I had a conversation with my mom about this, and I was like, look, I'm not going to buy into this fear stuff. This is, to me, a tactic by the enemy. He's doing whatever he can to just spin people up unnecessarily, and the best thing that I can do about it is surrender it to God. And at the same time, like, when I think about it, what ultimately is there to be afraid of? What's the worst possible scenario that could happen? Well, when I play it out, and I played it out loud when I was talking to my mom, I was like, so the worst possible thing that could happen is could get the virus, could not be paying attention to the symptoms, it could get really bad really fast, and if me and my wife both had it, we both could die. Well, death is not the end for us. Death just means we get to go and be in the presence of God for all eternity. That's a joyful event. It's something to celebrate. It's the good news of the gospel. We're not afraid of death. I don't necessarily look for it to happen. I'm not trying to hurry up that process. I love life, but at the same time, we love the fact that we are going to spend eternity with God, just as much, if not more so. So death is not the end for us. We will celebrate when our time has come. And so if the worst thing that could happen with catching the coronavirus is the end of this life, well, that's not a reason for us to be afraid. We don't fear death. And so now when I start walking it backwards, like, well, if that's the worst possible scenario that this virus can do to me and my wife, and we're not afraid of it, well, then what else could happen? Well, you get really sick. Okay, well, we might have to spend some time in a hospital. Okay, that kind of sucks, but then that goes away. And when you get sick, you don't have any control over that. You just have to deal with it and if it comes. And so after I just kind of did this scenario play with my mom, she was like, yeah, it's a good point, son. And, my peace resonated with her as well. I saw it on my coworkers' faces when I just shared my peace, and even when I talked to my mom, she was just kind of surprised at how peaceful I was about the situation. It's not fabricated. The peace of God surpasses all understanding is the most amazing form of peace I've ever experienced in my whole life. It's yet another way of how I know God is real. God is the most real thing in our lives. So I encourage you folks to not be afraid, to put on the armor of God, meditate on Scripture, and share your experiences with other people. Don't try to discourage other people's experiences. People that are living in fear are going to have their reasons why they are. Have conversations to try to understand them. And if you're living in peace, then try to share that. And hopefully your peace can be just as contagious and just as infectious. And for people that don't understand it, this can be a conversation starter to how God helps you in your life. I know that it helps me tremendously. Alone I can do nothing, but through God everything is possible. And in this case, God keeps us strong, me and my wife, to where fear is not going to affect us one way or the other when it comes to this coronavirus. I'm going to have to work from home for a while, and she's going to have a little bit of an extra break at school. And those are things that we don't have any control over, so we're just going to weather the situation and see how life plays out. So do not give in to fear, my brothers and sisters. And pray for your loved ones and your coworkers and your family, and even for your enemies too. Well, that's all for this episode. God bless everybody, and be safe. Take care.